Hello and welcome to another edition of Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon and it's great to have you with us. After a busy week in New York, North Korea's Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho has headed back to Pyongyang. When he arrived, it had seemed that there would be a new momentum in North Korea-US relations, but progress seems to have once again slowed, with no word yet on further talks. We'll take a look at where negotiations stand later in the show, but first we catch up with the latest headlines with Devin Whiting at the News Centre. Devin.
Hi, Jang-ho. The two Koreas are holding a joint event in the North Korean capital later this week to celebrate the 11th anniversary of their 2007 summit agreement, dubbed the October 4th Declaration. A South Korean delegation of roughly 150 people from the government, civic groups, and political parties will fly north on Thursday. The actual celebratory event will take place on Friday. Besides attending the event, the South Korean delegation will take a tour of Pyongyang and watch artistic performances. Because the delegation includes officials related to medical care and Korea's cultural heritage, Seoul says there could also be talks between South and North Korean officials who deal with those areas. A former Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency believes North Korea's denuclearization could be achieved by 2021, as pledged by its leader Kim Jong-un. In an interview with Voice of America, Heinonen said the proposed timeline is practical, but needs to be supported by early action. Instead of shipping the weapons out of the North, he suggested that the nuclear material in them be extracted and only that material be taken out of the country, which would only require 1 or 2 years. Heinonen added that the U.S. needs to take corresponding measures by helping with North Korea's industrial development, but with the sanctions still in place. A new survey shows nearly 8 out of 10 Americans support establishing official diplomatic relations with North Korea if the regime abandons its nuclear weapons. Polls conducted by the Chicago Council on Global Affairs also found 54% of Americans are in favor of providing financial and humanitarian aid to the North once it denuclearizes, while 77% support tightening sanctions if the regime does not abandon its nukes. 74% of the respondents supported a U.S. military presence in South Korea, up 4 percentage points from last year's survey. The South Korean parliament yesterday did not sign off on President Moon's nominee for Education Minister Yoon-hae, but by the time he asked him to, at least. But today he went ahead and appointed her anyway, as he's legally entitled to do. According to Presidential Office spokesperson Kim Hyunwook, the president decided to put her on the job because he believes she was sincere in her confirmation hearing and that she apologized for and explained the allegations against her sufficiently. Yoo is a former lawmaker with the ruling Democratic Party of Korea and also serves as Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs. She'd been accused of ethical lapses, including falsely registering her home address to get her daughter into a better elementary school. The main opposition Liberty Korea Party protested her nomination on those grounds and prevented an official report on her confirmation from being adopted. In other news, South Korea's overall industrial output climbed in August, driven mainly by manufacturing, especially cars. However, investment in equipment fell for the 6th month in a row, marking the longest decline in 20 years. Our Ko Ryun-hee has this report.
South Korea's overall industrial output in August increased by 0.5% from the previous month. According to Statistics Korea's data released on Tuesday, production in the mining, manufacturing, and services sectors led the growth. The agency said auto production increased by more than 20% on month.
There was a slight increase in auto exports to North America and the Middle East. Production of finished cars also increased because wage negotiations have been settled smoothly in local auto companies. This led to more demand for car components as well.
However, equipment investment dropped by 1.4% during the same period, falling for the 6th consecutive month. This is the longest run of decline since 1997, when South Korea was struggling due to the Asian financial crisis. Statistics Korea attribute the fall to a decrease in investment in the semiconductor industry. The agency said major semiconductor companies have already completed upgrading their facilities in March or April, and this led to drop in investment in semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Meanwhile, retail sales remained flat during the same period, but rose 6% on-year. Separate data released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday showed that businesses have a gloomy outlook for the near future. The business sentiment index was just 75 in September, up 1 point from August. A reading below 100 means there are more pessimists than optimists on the local economy. 고르니, Arirang News.
The death toll from last Friday's earthquake and tsunami in Indonesia continues to rise. For survivors, the situation is growing increasingly desperate as they wait for supplies and aid. Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
Palu, a city of about 380,000 people, at the top of a long, narrow bay on the west coast of Sulawesi Island. After a 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck the area on Friday, it triggered tsunami waves as high as 6 meters. As of now, the confirmed death toll stands well in excess of 800, and that figure is expected to rise. Rescuers say the number is sure to go higher as they reach remote villages cut off since the disaster struck. Most of the victims have been found under the ruins of collapsed buildings, houses, and hotels, though many are feared buried under landslides.
As for the search and rescue mission, we know from what we have seen from the affected area, such as the rubble and collapsed building as a result of the tsunami and the reports from people, that there are relatives still missing.
The nation's disaster agency said Monday that more heavy equipment and rescue personnel was needed for the search. Meanwhile, on Monday, a crowd of people flooded the small damaged airport in Palu, hoping for a ticket out of the disaster area. Hundreds of survivors were able to board planes and leave.
The earthquake was so powerful, all of us ran out in a big group. We were shouting, people were screaming, God is great. People were repenting.
Nearby supermarkets have been cleared out, with reports of people saying they have been looted. However, the government has played down fears of looting, adding the quake victims can take things from shops, as the government will pay compensation later. While there have been no reports of violence, dozens of armed police are guarding the city's banks. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, 4 South Korean nationals in Palu, Indonesia are still unaccounted for. The South Korean Foreign Ministry has verified the safety of 5 others and is trying to find these 4 people, but so far they've made no contact. Among them is a man possibly trapped under the rubble of a hotel. That hotel has been given priority by the Indonesian authorities, along with 6 other locations in the search. Meanwhile, South Korean Prime Minister Ri Yong-ho has instructed the foreign ministry to look for ways to help Indonesia recover from the disaster, such as dispatching emergency relief troops and sending medical aid. Today is Senior Citizens Day in South Korea, a country with one of the fastest aging societies in the world. There are concerns about how society will be able to support so many senior citizens economically and in other ways. So Bo-bin reports.
South Korea is on course to become one of the fastest-paced aging populations among the 35 members of the OECD. The ever-increasing number of elderly people coupled with longer life expectancy has generated concerns about old age in South Korean society. According to a survey conducted by the National Human Rights Commission of Korea on some 1,000 people aged 65 or older, poverty and generational conflict have been identified as the biggest concerns facing elderly people. About 38% said they worry about their economic stability, and at least 24% said it's difficult to make a living, but they didn't receive any support from the government. With worries growing, the average age for expected retirement came to 72.9 years, up 4.4 years compared to the previous year. Also, as elderly people are becoming more and more isolated from society, 1 out of 4 elderly people have pondered ending their lives. The suicide rate for the elderly in South Korea is more than twice the national average.
There's great concern about the aging population, and it's connected to the economic difficulties facing the younger generation, such as the low birth rate and unemployment.
With about 10 years left before South Korea is officially classified as a super-aged society, experts say government support for the human rights of the elderly is urgently needed. 서보빈, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
North Korea's top diplomat has wrapped up his week-long stay in New York for the UN General Assembly. Compared to last year, it was a rather more amicable atmosphere, but North Korea continued to demand further measures by the US to build trust. And amid the current stalemate, it seems the North has not yet responded to Washington's proposal to meet in Vienna. Iji-won reports.
North Korea's Foreign Affairs Minister Ri Yong-ho departed on a plane home on Monday. It's been a week since he arrived in New York for the UN General Assembly, where he held bilateral talks with the US, China, Russia, and Japan. It was an unusually busy schedule for Pyongyang's top diplomat, and many watchers say it reflects the recent positive developments on the Korean peninsula. But still, North Korea continued to press the US to take reciprocal measures for the regime's denuclearization steps.
We have not yet seen the United States take corresponding measures for our actions. On the contrary, it is going against declaring an end to the Korean War and only toughening sanctions to force us to denuclearize first, instead of meeting our concerns for lack of stable peace on the peninsula.
North Korea's request for a political declaration to end the Korean War continued on Tuesday as well. In a report through its state-run Korean Central News Agency, Pyongyang said ending the war is not something to be bargained, and it should have been done decades ago. It added the move stands as the basis for building new North Korea-US relations, but said that if the US doesn't want to end the war, then the North, quote, won't particularly hope for it. With the stalemate, watchers say it seems North Korea has not yet responded to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's invitation to meet the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, in Vienna at the earliest opportunity. The Austrian capital is home to the headquarters of the International Atomic Energy Agency, whose experts are likely to be invited to the north should Pyongyang keep its promise to dismantle its Dongchangri missile engine test site, as mentioned in the Pyongyang Declaration. But with Pompeo set to make his fourth visit to Pyongyang sometime this month, many are hopeful the North and the U.S. will make some progress in their talks and also seal a deal for their proposed second summit. Iji-won, Arirang News.
Now, to discuss further on this issue, we have with us Professor Kim Hyunwook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
So, the North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho spent just over a week in New York, attending the UN General Assembly, but also holding talks with his counterparts from the US, China and Russia, among others. What do you think his aim for his visit to New York was, and do you think he achieved it?
Well, I think the biggest aim for him is after there was stalemate between the U.S. and North Korea, there was ongoing, meeting between North and the U.S. back on track after the North-South Summit meeting. But I think there still remained some hurdles and obstacles that two countries had to coordinate and overcome. So I think one of the important channels is the foreign minister level channel, Pompeo and Ri Yong-ho. They might deal with each other, the hurdles and obstacles they have to overcome. For example, North Korea requests the peace declaration from the United States. The U.S. thinks that there should be the denuclearization measures by North Korea first. So that coordination is something that Ri Yong-ho was aiming at in New York when he was talking with Pompeo. I don't know, afterwards when he delivered a speech at the UN General Assembly, his speech was asking for a peace declaration from the United States. What is needed is the mutual trust between the US and North Korea. There would be no unilateral denuclearization measures by North Korea. So it seems like the two sides have not come up with the agreement yet about the thorny issues. We'll see how it goes, but so far still the talks would continue, I think.
When Ri met Pompeo in New York, I mean, Pompeo said he'll be going to Pyongyang very soon, sometime this month. It's been a few days now, the month has started, but there's still no word yet on when Pompeo will go to Pyongyang. Is that a concern at all, or do you think we have to be just a bit more patient?
I think both. That's clearly a concern. I mean, the US and North Korea still have the same gaps with each other, with the gap that they had when they had the summit meeting in June 12th between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. At that time, the gap was, okay, let's have CVID in the agreement requested by North Korea, by the United States. And North Korea, in return, counter-argued that, okay, if you want CVID in the agreement, there should be a lifting sanctions to be stipulated in the agreement. And now the gap is, okay, you do that first, the peace declaration first. No, you have to do the measures of denuclearization. So the gaps are still there. But I think two sides, North Korea and the US, does not want to break the frame of negotiations. They still need to continue the frames of negotiations. So I think for some time, we can just be patient. I mean, South Korea is sometimes eager to intervene if things seems kind of stalemated. But I think sometimes we have to be patient because they don't want to break the frame. The frame goes, away and seems like to be broken down. I think they will come up and feel like, oh, this is a crisis. We have to talk and we have to make this continue again. So I think sometimes we have to be patient for a while.
So you say the two sides don't want to break the frame yet, but a new factor that has come in over the last couple of months is the new US Special Representative on North Korea, Stephen Biegun. So the US State Department appointed this new figure to deal with North Korea as well. And there were signs that the State Department and Pompeo actually announced that there would be talks with Stephen Biegun in Vienna with North Korean representatives very soon. But again, there's no word on those talks either. I mean, what do you think, Professor? Do you think we will see some sort of talks in Vienna soon? And what are they going to be about?
This talk is also related to the gap between the two countries that we just have talked about. The gap between the peace declaration requested by North Korea and the denuclearization measures by the United States. What has been reached as an agreement between North and South Koreas in the summit meeting was, okay, if there's some corresponding measures by the United States, North Korea would dismantle Yongbyon facilities. But the US requested, okay, dismantling the Yongbyon facilities should accompany the verification. So that's why they decided the meeting place as Vienna, which has IAEA and CTBTO. A lot of experts about the verification are there. So when Biegun and North Korean representative going to talk in Vienna, that means that they were talking about the verification issues. That means that they have agreed upon the verification accompanied at the Yongbyon facility site. If there's no talk begun yet, that means that they haven't agreed upon anything about it. Maybe North Korea will request, okay, there should be some corresponding measures, something like the peace declaration from the United States. Okay, the US says, okay, there should be the measures of destroying the Yongbyon facilities with, inspectors on the site. So that kinds of, ideas are still colliding each other. I have not coordinated yet.
You also mentioned a couple of times the declaration to end the Korean War. That was very much flagged up by Ri Yong-ho during his UN speech. But then a North Korean state media commentary was issued earlier today. It was a rather curious rebuke. I mean, on the supposed North Korea, basically it was saying North Korea experts are saying North Korea is demanding from the US the declaration to end the Korean War is needed in exchange for denuclearization. It stated that this declaration is not a bargaining chip. That's what the North Koreans are saying, and that is something that should have been settled a long time ago. Even going as far as to say that actually, if the US doesn't want it, we don't want it either. It's kind of a childish kind of almost a rebuke. I mean, how do you interpret this response?
Maybe North Korea would need some measures to guarantee its regime security before it begins denuclearization. That's something that they request as the form of peace declaration to end the Korean War. I think North Korea knows that Trump needs some kinds of outcome before midterm election. And kind of looking at that one and focusing on that time issues, North Korea is pressuring President Trump. Okay, if maybe you want, the US wants first declaration issues first, but North Korea wants the declaration of the anti-Korean War. That's the measures that needs to be done right before the denuclearization measures, the measures that is kind of good expression of the mutual trust building. Also, looking at that, kind of, it's a pressuring, President Trump. President Trump definitely needs to have an agreement, whether they have summit meeting before the midterm or after the midterm election. But anyhow, the President Trump needs to come up with an agreement. And I think, this is, kind of a way to pressure Trump. Okay, if you can accept it, okay, fine. Let it be, okay, that kind of issues, kind of a bargaining chip that North Korea is using with President Trump, I think.
Let's move on to South Korea's relationship with North Korea. So on Thursday, in a couple of days' time, South and North Korea will celebrate the 11th anniversary of the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit and the declaration that was signed there, with a joint event of being held in North Korea. South Korea is sending a delegation of 150 people, with about 20 government officials as well. Why have the two Koreas agreed to do this, and what is its significance?
This is very meaningful anniversary, I think. The President Roh Moo-hyun and Kim Jong-il at the time had a summit meeting. They have come up with an agreement, very detailed agreement about how we can enhance the North-South exchanges in almost every field, including the economic field. And Panmunjom Declaration is inheriting a lot of things that was contained in the agreement. So that's very meaningful. Second, I think North-South needs to talk more in detail in a working level about how two countries can implement all the issues that has been agreed in the Pyeongyang, joint agreement. So that's why there are a lot of people, like 150 people and 20 government officials visiting North Korea for that anniversary. And also, I think very thorny issues and sensitive issues, for example, forming a peace area in West Sea around the NLL area. That has been mentioned at the October 4th summit meeting and again at the Panmunjom Declaration. Still needs to be clarified. There have not been agreed, standard about in which area they would build the peace area in the West Sea. So all that kind of things might be talked in this anniversary, I think. And the origin of all these issues is the October 4th summit meeting in 2007.
Do you think Kim Jong-un will make an appearance?
Well, I think this is a very meaningful one. He has been paying a lot of attention to the South Korean envoys visiting North Korea. The meaning that he can find by participating in this anniversary is that North and South Koreas can continue the meetings in a working level with the origin of Roh Moo-hyun visiting North Korea, who has came up with a lot of detailed exchanges which North Korea desperately wanted from the South Korea. So I think Kim Jong-un would come and participate and celebrate the anniversary, I think, together with South Korean delegates, I think.
And just before we go, among bookmakers and betting sites, President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un are odds-on favorites to win the Nobel Peace Prize this year. Some have pointed out that it's actually difficult this year because it's too late, as all suggestions for the prize have been made earlier in the year, and there's not been enough time. But do you think it could happen?
I think the possibility would be very high if they have registered for the candidates before February 1st, which is the deadline for the registration. Unfortunately, all the events, for example, the U.S. North Summit meeting and North-South Summit meeting has been held before the February 1st. So I don't think the candidate registration would not have been done. So they are not viable candidates. If possible, I think they would try second shot next year before February 1st. But not this year.
But isn't there the slight controversy of what happened last time with Kim Dae-jung as well? Seeing that there was the slight controversy that's saying, oh, Kim Dae-jung bought the Nobel. Registered? No, but he bought the Nobel Prize, saying because of the funds that he gave to North Korea. There was a slight issue there with, in the past.
Oh, I don't think it's the matter of funds. This time it's the matter of process of registration. If they are registered as candidates, I think they're the top-notch candidates to be nominated as a Nobel Prize. But this time they are not listed as the candidates for the Nobel Prize winner.
Sure, we'll have to see, I guess. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in as usual and sharing us your insights.
Thank you very much.
That's all from me. On Wednesday, South Korea celebrates Kicheonjeol, the National Foundation Day, which means I'll be back Thursday for more analysis and discussion of the day's top stories. Thank you for watching and goodbye for now.